We are in the 21st century at the head of an ever-expanding past or an ever-expanding history. We only move into the 21st century on the foundation of things that have been established long, long ago. The principles that govern the way visual representation works are still the same principles that govern the way they work 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Makes perfect sense to me to go back to the origins of these things and pick up from there. To take up the challenge, really, to find another way to make these things seem fresh, even if they're not. The painting Many Mansions, which I finished back in 1995, it's a very classical structure that the imagery is hung on. When I started out, I mean, the artists that I really admired, people like Géricault, that whole genre of history painting, that grand narrative style of painting, was something that I really wanted to position my work in relation to. And so in order to achieve a similar kind of authority that those paintings had, I had to adopt a similar structural format. I think in general the paintings have been really well received, but there's a lingering controversy around the sort of unequivocally black, kind of emphatically black figures. I wouldn't have done them if I didn't feel it, but I tend to think having that extreme color, that kind of black, is amazingly beautiful and powerful. The first painting I did was way back in 1980, was a painting called The Portrait of the Artist as a Shadow of His Former Self. And it was the first time I had used this simplified, kind of reductive representation of a black figure. And so that painting was the one that established the black figure as a mode of operating for me. What I was thinking to do with my image was to reclaim the image of blackness as an emblem of power. And I think it still functions pretty much that same way. I do a lot of different things, but I don't find any of them incompatible because they all sort of reinforce each other. It's like whether I'm using film, video, or anything else, I mean, either I'm working with a set of conventions that have already been established or I'm working against a set of conventions that have already been established. But the primary source of my ideas about visual representation come from pictorial representation through painting. So this light is actually going to sit near here with a big sun on it. So it'll have its own light source. All right, can you give me a hand? Because I want to push this back. These houses are actually a part of a project I'm doing for a show at the Columbus Museum entitled Illusions of Eden. The theme I've chosen to work with is the theme of home, and essentially staged it. What I'm looking at, in a way, is how impenetrable those places are to people who are not on the inside. The whole idea of us really being, in some ways, obsessed at this point with penetrating that wall, finding out what other people are doing, you know, what's going on in their lives, what's going on in their houses, and is what's going on in their houses what we expect to be there. It's live. All the way live.
It is.
This is the
The
Bruce
rest
household.
of the, oh yeah, this
Come
is
by
real
for
prepared.
Christmas sometime.
Oh, don't do Christmas.
Hey, he gonna get here.
Somebody's got to take up for your mother.
Yeah.
There we go. But I didn't know it at first.
Now, Carrie, I don't have them.
Go ahead,
That's
go on.
one. That's a
That's-
favorite.
This was for my 74th birthday from Carrie. And it says, what did you get Super T for her birthday? You see how super I am? Super T. It said, lots of love, and I like that.
The defining experience I had that made me understand that being an artist was what I wanted to be was that my kindergarten teacher kept a scrapbook of old photographs she had clipped out of magazines, Christmas cards, Valentine's cards, you know, all manner of greeting cards, advertisements, and things like that. And she kept that scrapbook, and it was something that she only made available to the kid who was best behaved that day. And if you were really well behaved, you got to look at that scrapbook while everybody else took their nap after recess. And it really was that book. It's like the day I got a chance to look at that book, it really changed my life because I sat there looking at the book. I mean, and thinking with tears in my eyes. I mean, literally with tears in my eyes, thinking that, wow, it's like this is just so amazing, you know. And that's what I want to do. You know, I want to make pictures like these. I want to make pictures that affect other people the way these pictures are affecting me.
I don't have a date on this card, but it's an early collage. It just says beautiful. And it has a black figure, and I remember asking Carrie, did he mean to have that spot there? But he did. And, and so that's how I began to understand the many complexities.
When I was in junior high school, I got a summer scholarship to take a drawing class at the Otis Art Institute. The drawing teacher had a book that he put on the opaque projector. It was Images of Dignity, the drawings of Charles White. And he showed us those drawings, and I had never seen anything like it before. Because prior to that, you know, almost all of the artists I'd encountered in art history books were European. I thought, wow, you know, it's like, this is just amazing. He says, well, you know, Charles White's got a studio upstairs, and he said it was okay for us to go into the studio and see some work in progress. You got to see the process. You got to see how ugly a drawing can look before it was brought to this point of refinement and finish. That was what was really interesting to me. I mean, seeing these stages. And then, yeah, let's see what happens. Well, you got nothing to lose.
The initial images, the underlying images, all come from photographs of my family in Cuba. Mm-hmm. They start at about 38 and go right up to the revolution.
How do you intend to now incorporate the present moment? Is that important at all?
That's a good question. Probably a dumb thing to say, but I hadn't really thought that all the way through yet.
That's not a dumb thing to say, but it's just the kind of questions I would be interested in asking and hearing some reflection on, you know. Part of what I'm always interested in seeing when I come to the museum is not really how refined or how finished the work can be, but I'm really interested in showing, especially to my students, evidence of the artist's thinking and evidence of the artist's process. Some of what's evident in a painting like this, an unfinished painting, is that it reminds me of just how difficult making a painting is. It confirms the suspicion that I always had that these things don't come into existence by magic. I'm going to take this out partly because when you're thinking about the way to organize the painting, there's some structural considerations you have to keep in mind. This is definitely the kinds of images you're working with. They will actually tell you how to make your painting. This is essentially how I work on my stuff. I'm always referring to some other source to give me some clues to how things in my own work can be organized better. Well, what I'm doing right now is actually I'm actually doing a comic strip in newspaper form that I could use for a particular installation at the Carnegie. What I hit on as a subject was this idea that when you go to the museum to see African art, I mean, those symbolic representations of the heroes seem pretty inert. The tradition from which they come doesn't have the same kind of currency that the tradition of Greek mythological heroes has, although there are parallels between those two traditions. And so I thought what I would do would be to take those African sculptures and reanimate them, in a sense, and make them into the superheroes. To become, you know, like a new Luke Skywalker, or a new Darth Vader, or a new Batman, or a new Superman. Now, when I was growing up, reading Marvel comics, you know, the X-Men, the Mighty Hulk, Spider-Man, all of those characters were amazing characters to me. And so what I'm actually doing is kind of reverting back to my childhood, I guess. I thought what I would do with this project was to take a form that's in some ways already undervalued in America, take a subject that's underrepresented, and try to find a way in which we can carry these traditions into the future so that they don't have to just dissipate and die.
To order a 2-tape set of Art 21, Art in the 21st Century, on video cassette, or the companion book to the program, call PBS Home Video at 1-800-PLAY-PBS. To learn more about Art 21, Art in the 21st Century, and to download the free teacher's guide, please visit PBS online at pbs.org.